Disinformation never stops, and neither do we. Welcome to StopFake, the place where we dissect disinformation and set the record straight on fakes about Ukraine. I'm Marko Suprun, and this week we make short shrift of the following fakes. Ukraine leads in human rights violations, Kyiv recognizes it cannot return Crimea, and Ukraine to become an international nuclear dump. Details ahead. This week, Russia's foreign ministry criticized the latest annual U.S. State Department human rights report as an opus full of Russophobic stereotypes, filled with politicized assessments and crude ideological cliches against Russia. The foreign ministry's statement became big news for the Kremlin propagandist media, with RT, Gazeta.ru, and NTV all featuring stories denouncing the State Department for preparing the report in an exclusively negative manner with regard to Russia, while keeping silent on the human rights violations Moscow predictably alleges are taking place in Ukraine. The report describes the human rights situation in Ukraine over 2017 and states that there is a regime thriving in Ukraine which condones murders, illegal political persecution and disappearances of people, harsh and life-threatening conditions in prisons, arbitrary arrests, and detentions. The State Department report emphasizes, however, that all these violations are recorded in the occupied areas of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, as well as the annexed Crimean Peninsula. These violations are committed by the Russian occupying forces. The report reads, and look, here's the full quote. Russia-led forces in the Donbas region engaged in politically motivated disappearances, torture, and unlawful detention, restricted freedom of speech, assembly, and association, restricted movement across the line of contact in eastern Ukraine, and restricted humanitarian aid. The most significant human rights issues in Russian-occupied Crimea included politically motivated disappearances, torture, and restrictions on expression and association. Russian media, however, conveniently omit this very salient detail in their fake reporting, choosing to only say the violations are taking place in Ukraine, but ignoring the fact that it is Russian occupying forces who are committing the violations. The U.S. State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor presents an annual report on those issues throughout the world. Following in the footsteps of last week's fake claiming that Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko plans to deny Ukrainian citizenship to all those who were forced to obtain Russian passports in Crimea, Russian propagandist media has come up with yet another fake, that Ukraine is reconciling itself to Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea. The fake stories originated in the deliberate falsification of comments by the Ukrainian Deputy Minister for the temporarily occupied territories, Georgy Tuka, during an appearance on Ukrainian television channel 112. Presently, Ukraine is in no position to take back Crimea, declared Lenta.ru, seemingly citing Tuka. Media in the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine went even further. DNR's Novorossiya declared that Ukraine was a step away from recognizing Crimea as Russian. Now, Tuka participated in Channel 112's evening prime news program, where he addressed a variety of issues. Answering a question about a small island called Tuzla in the Kerch Strait, which Russia took at the same time it occupied Crimea, Tuka said that Ukraine currently could do very little to eject Moscow from Crimea, but must continue to work through diplomatic and political channels to rectify the situation. Tuka goes on to say that Russia will at some point not only have to answer for Crimea's illegal annexation, but will also have to return the peninsula. Nowhere during the entire program does Tuka or anyone else say that Ukraine is incapable of returning Crimea and must therefore recognize the peninsula as Russian. On April 17, proposed legislation on improving the management of radioactive waste was given its first reading in the Ukrainian parliament. That very same day, Novostnoye Agentstvo Kharkov declared that foreign companies will soon be dumping their nuclear waste in Ukraine. Such a claim is a complete fake, as the proposed legislation only provides clarification of the existing regulatory and legal framework for radioactive waste management. The new classification meets the international requirements on nuclear waste management established by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, says Ukraine's Environment Minister Ostap Semerak. To protect people and the environment, the IAEA recommends that nuclear waste be divided into 4 categories: very low level, medium active, and highly active. During parliamentary discussions of the proposed legislation, Minister Semerak reported that most of the nuclear waste that needs to be stored in Ukraine was generated after the Chernobyl accident. He also emphasized that there is no nuclear waste from other countries being brought to Ukraine and would not be in the future as it is prohibited by law. The proposed new classification has absolutely no bearing on this. Now, according to Energoatom, the company that operates all 4 of Ukraine's nuclear power stations, the disposal of nuclear waste can occur only in the country of origin. Ukraine's Nuclear Forum, an association of several nuclear energy companies, told StopFake that they adhere to the international agreement which stipulates that all nuclear waste is processed and stored in the country of origin. That's it for this week. For more dissected fakes as well as tips on how to spot them, visit our website, stopfake.org. Remember, there is some very interesting work being done by our colleagues to battle disinformation in our context section. Listen, respect your mind, be vigilant, and don't consume fakes. If you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.